They saw him as human trash. When he smiled, wormholes collapsed. But they never imagined what would happen at the Kaiser black hole. Surrounded by Alliance warships, Caden's genuine smile didn't just destroy. It created golden light erupted from his being, transforming the black hole into a nexus of free passage, shattering the Alliance's monopoly on the stars forever. In the cold vacuum of Zalim's upper atmosphere, the silence was absolute. Caden Miles watched from the observation deck as another prison transport docked at the orbital station. From this distance, the new arrivals looked like insects trapped in amber, their orange jumpsuits bright against the station's gray hull. Soon, they would join him and the thousands of other human trash working the mineral extraction plants on the planet's barren surface. Caden's reflection stared back at him from the reinforced glass. Gaunt face, hollow eyes, the dull orange of his own jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. 5 years of heavy labor had whittled away at his once sturdy build. His fingers, once precise instruments that had manipulated the delicate mathematics of wormhole engineering, were now calloused and scarred. A guard tapped his baton against the observation deck's doorframe. "Time's up, trash. Back to your station." Caden didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that silence was safest in Zalim. Words were currency here, and he was bankrupt in every sense. He turned away from the window and shuffled past the guard, keeping his eyes down. The transport tube descended rapidly to the planet's surface, the gravitational shift making his stomach lurch. Through the tube's transparent walls, he watched Zalim grow closer, a dead rock at the edge of Pearl Galaxy Alliance space, valued only for its rich deposits of quantum-stabilizing minerals. Not a single plant grew on its surface. The Alliance had stripped the atmosphere centuries ago to ease extraction. As the tube reached the surface station, Caden joined the stream of orange-clad workers flowing toward the main excavation site. Above them, massive industrial lights simulated a perpetual noon, harsh and shadowless. The workers' breath formed small clouds in the artificially oxygenated cold. Caden took his position at extraction point 17, where he'd spend the next 12 hours breaking down quantum-sensitive rock with a handheld pulsar drill. The monotony was almost welcome. It allowed his mind to wander to places the Alliance couldn't reach. He thought of his mother's small apartment on Cassini Prime, with its window boxes overflowing with Terran marigolds. He remembered the smell of coffee brewing in the early morning before his university classes. He recalled the precise moment he developed the mathematical proof that had earned him a position at the Alliance Wormhole Engineering Corps, the pinnacle of scientific achievement. And inevitably, his thoughts turned to Gamma Centauri, the inhabited planet that had disintegrated when his wormhole stabilization system allegedly failed. 3 billion lives erased in an instant. The memory made his hands shake on the drill controls. "I didn't do it," he whispered to himself. The words lost in the constant industrial roar of the mining operation. The calculations were perfect. Perfect or not, he'd been declared guilty. His identity chip had been deactivated, his citizenship revoked. In the eyes of the Alliance, he was no longer human, just another piece of human trash, sent to labor at the edge of known space until his body gave out. The shift supervisor's voice crackled over the comm system. "Attention all extraction units. The Alliance Science Division will be conducting wormhole calibration tests in Sector 9 today. All operations in adjacent sectors will continue as scheduled." Caden's heart quickened. Sector 9 was just beyond the ridge where he worked. The Science Division rarely conducted tests this far from the core systems. Whatever they were attempting, it must be significant. Hours later, as his shift neared its end, the sky above Sector 9 began to shimmer. Caden recognized the signs immediately, the subtle bending of light, the ripple of space-time as a wormhole formed. Despite everything, he couldn't help but watch with professional interest. The wormhole bloomed like an exotic flower, its event horizon stabilizing into a perfect circle of darkness surrounded by a halo of energy. Through it, Caden could see stars in configurations that didn't match Zalim's night sky, a window to another part of the galaxy, perhaps thousands of light-years away. A small fleet of Alliance vessels approached the wormhole's mouth. Standard protocol: send unmanned probes first, followed by small manned craft if the passage proves stable. Caden watched the familiar procedure with a mixture of nostalgia and bitterness. The first probe entered the wormhole and disappeared. Moments later, confirmation lights on the nearest Alliance ship flashed green. Successful transit. A second probe followed, then a third. Finally, the lead ship itself began its approach. Caden couldn't help himself. As the sleek vessel glided toward the wormhole's mouth, he felt a surge of appreciation for the perfect mathematics that made such travel possible. The elegance of space-time folding in on itself, creating a bridge across impossible distances. Despite everything the Alliance had taken from him, they couldn't take his understanding of the universe's hidden architecture. A small smile formed on his lips, the first in years. The moment his face muscles tensed, something changed. The wormhole's perimeter flickered, its perfect circle distorting. The lead ship had already committed to its entry vector and couldn't adjust in time. It struck the now unstable event horizon at an angle, and the results were catastrophic. The wormhole collapsed, releasing a surge of energy that tore the ship apart. Secondary explosions blossomed as its power core breached. The remaining vessels scattered, but two more were caught in the blast radius. Within seconds, where there had been a stable wormhole and a proud Alliance fleet, there was only expanding debris and radiation. Alarms blared throughout the mining complex. Guards rushed to secure the workers, many of whom had stopped to witness the disaster. Caden stood frozen, the drill forgotten in his hands. It wasn't possible. The chances of a calibrated wormhole collapsing at exactly that moment. "You!" a guard captain pointed directly at him. "You were smiling. I saw you." Caden's blood ran cold. "No, I—" "Detain him," the captain ordered. "Priority communication to command. We have the saboteur." Before Caden could protest further, guards tackled him to the ground. His face pressed against the cold rock as restraints were locked around his wrists. Through the chaos of shouting and alarms, one thought crystallized in his mind. It couldn't be coincidence. His smile and the wormhole's collapse had happened simultaneously. But that was impossible, wasn't it? The holding cell was barely large enough for Caden to lie down. 3 days had passed since the wormhole disaster, during which he'd been interrogated repeatedly by increasingly high-ranking Alliance officials. Each time, the questions were the same. How did he sabotage the wormhole? Who was he working with? What was the goal of the attack? And each time, Caden had no answers to give. He'd done nothing except smile at the wrong moment. On the 4th day, the cell door slid open to reveal a tall figure in the gleaming black uniform of Alliance Command. Insignia on the collar marked the visitor as a fleet commander, the highest-ranking official Caden had seen since his original trial. "Prisoner 756 ABX, the commander said, reading from a datapad. "Formerly Caden Miles, stripped of citizenship following the Gamma Centauri incident." Cold eyes lifted to examine Caden. "I am Commander Vosgaw of the 7th Fleet. I've reviewed the footage of the recent event." Caden remained seated on the floor of his cell. "I had nothing to do with it." "The timing suggests otherwise." Vosgaw stepped into the cell, the door sealing behind him. "At precisely 1742:03, you smiled. At 1742:03, the wormhole collapsed, destroying 3 Alliance vessels and killing 74 personnel." "Correlation isn't causation," Caden replied, falling back on the scientific principles that had once governed his life. "It was coincidence. Once, perhaps, but twice?" Voska's expression remained impassive. Your wormhole design failed at Gamma Centauri, and now another wormhole fails in your presence. The Alliance doesn't believe in such coincidences. I didn't cause the Gamma Centauri disaster. My calculations were perfect. Yes. So you've maintained? Voska paced the small cell. Which makes the alternative even more interesting. If your calculations were perfect, and yet the wormhole still collapsed. He paused, looking directly at Caden. Then perhaps something else caused the failure. Or someone. Caden felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cell's temperature. What are you suggesting? The science division has a theory. Some individuals may possess a natural ability to influence space-time, a genetic anomaly that allows them to affect wormhole stability through emotional states. Voska's voice was clinical, detached. They call it the tide phenomenon. Until now, it's been purely theoretical.
That's impossible,
says the man who smiled and destroyed a wormhole. Voska tapped something on his datapad. You're being transferred to a special facility for further study. The science division is quite eager to understand how you do what you do. Before Caden could respond, the cell door opened again, and armed guards entered. Wait, he protested, as they hauled him to his feet. I'm not what you think. I can't control wormholes. Commander Voska watched impassively as the guards dragged Caden away. Everyone is what I think they are. Trash. The only question is whether you're a threat to be eliminated or a weapon to be used. The guards were halfway to the transport dock when the facility's power failed. Emergency lights activated, bathing the corridors in pulsing red. In the momentary confusion, Caden felt the guard's grip on his right arm loosen. Acting on instinct, he twisted free and drove his elbow into the guard's throat, as the man staggered back, gasping. Caden turned to face the second guard, only to find him already unconscious on the floor. A figure dressed in maintenance coveralls stood over the fallen guard, holding what looked like a modified shock baton. Come on, the figure said, voice muffled by a filtration mask. We've got about 3 minutes before backup systems identify the power surge as sabotage. Caden hesitated. Who are you? Someone who doesn't think you deserve to be dissected by Alliance scientists. The figure tossed him a bundle of clothing. Put these on. Quickly. Having no better options, Caden changed into the offered maintenance uniform, hiding his prisoner jumpsuit underneath a service panel. The stranger led him through a series of maintenance tunnels that descended deep below the mining facility, eventually emerging in what appeared to be an abandoned section of an older mining operation. Where are we going? Caden asked as they hurried through the dimly lit passageways. Old Zalim City, the stranger replied. What's left of it, anyway? The Alliance abandoned the original settlement when they expanded the mining operation 50 years ago. It's not on any current maps. They continued downward for what seemed like hours, the air growing staler as they descended. Finally, they reached a massive reinforced door that the stranger unlocked with a complex series of inputs on a hidden panel. Welcome to nowhere, the stranger said as the door slid open, revealing a cavernous space beyond. Caden stepped through the doorway and found himself in what had once been an underground plaza. The ceiling, hundreds of meters above, was studded with fading luminescent panels that mimicked a night sky. Abandoned buildings surrounded the plaza, their windows dark and empty. The place had the feel of a tomb. You can take off the mask now, the stranger said, removing their own to reveal a young woman with dark hair, tied back in a practical knot. The air's recycled down here, but it's clean enough. Caden pulled off his mask. Thank you for helping me, but I still don't know who you are or why you're doing this. My name is Kiri Valen, she said, extending a hand. And I helped you because I've been monitoring Alliance communications about the wormhole incident. They're calling you the Tide Smile now, a human who can destabilize spacetime with an expression. That made you interesting enough to risk a rescue. Caden shook her hand cautiously. They're wrong. I can't do what they think I can. Are you sure? Kiri raised an eyebrow. Because the footage is pretty convincing. 1 second there's a stable wormhole. The next you smile. And then, boom. She made an exploding gesture with her hands. It was coincidence, Caden insisted. It had to be. 2 coincidences, Gamma Centauri and now this? Kiri shook her head. The Alliance doesn't believe it. And frankly, neither do I. Before Caden could argue further, a deep voice called from the shadows of a nearby building. Bring him inside, Kiri. The Alliance will have drones searching the surface within the hour. Kiri gestured for Caden to follow her toward the voice. They entered what had once been some kind of administrative building. Its grand atrium, now serving as a makeshift living space. Equipment of various sorts. Communications arrays, computer terminals, weapons, was arranged around the room's perimeter. A tall, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped gray hair stood by a tactical display. His bearing was unmistakably military, though he wore civilian clothes. He studied Caden with piercing eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. This is Bishop, Kiri said. Former Alliance security officer. He helps me stay 1 step ahead of their surveillance systems. Former officer? Caden asked. Let's just say the Alliance and I had a disagreement about the proper treatment of civilians during the Orion uprising. Bishop replied, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken history. I chose to retire rather than follow certain orders. Bishop's been monitoring Alliance channels, Kiri explained. They're bringing in the 7th Fleet to search for you. Commander Voska is personally overseeing the operation. Why? Caden asked. What makes me so important that a fleet commander would get involved? Bishop manipulated the tactical display, bringing up what appeared to be classified Alliance documents. Because if what they suspect is true, you represent both the greatest threat to Alliance wormhole technology and potentially its greatest weapon. I'm not a weapon, Caden protested. Tell that to the 74 people who died when that wormhole collapsed, Bishop replied, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. If you can destabilize space-time with a smile, imagine what the Alliance could do with that ability. Targeted wormhole collapses could isolate entire star systems, cutting them off from the network. Strategic collapses could destroy enemy fleets without firing a shot. Or, Kiri added, they could use you to find a way to prevent such collapses, making their own wormhole network invulnerable while leaving others susceptible. Caden sank into a chair, the implications overwhelming him. But I don't know how I did it, if I even did it at all. Then I suggest we find out, Bishop said, because right now, you're either the most dangerous man in the galaxy or the most valuable. Either way, your life expectancy is measured in days, unless we can understand what's happening. Caden looked between his 2 unlikely allies. How do we do that? Kiri grinned. We make you smile, of course. The first tests were conducted in a sealed chamber deep within the abandoned city. Kiri had rigged a small-scale wormhole simulator, not capable of creating an actual wormhole, but able to detect the kinds of space-time fluctuations that preceded one. Okay, she said, adjusting the equipment. Think happy thoughts. Caden sat in the center of the chamber, electrodes attached to his temples and chest to monitor his physiological responses. I haven't had many of those lately. Try memories, Bishop suggested from his position by the monitoring equipment. Something from before Zalim. Closing his eyes, Caden tried to summon positive memories. His graduation from the academy. The day his wormhole stabilization theory was published. The pride in his mother's eyes when he joined the engineering corps. But each memory was now tainted by what came after. The disaster, the trial, the years of imprisonment and hard labor. Every smile in his past felt like a prelude to catastrophe. Nothing's happening, Kiri reported after an hour of attempts. The sensors aren't picking up any fluctuations. Maybe it only works with actual wormholes, Bishop suggested. Or maybe I can't do what they think I can, Caden said. Kiri frowned, studying the readouts. No, there's something here. Micro-fluctuations, barely registering, but they spike whenever you seem more relaxed. She looked up at him. You're holding back, consciously or unconsciously. You're suppressing whatever this is.
Wouldn't you? Caden asked. If you thought your smile might tear a hole in reality.
Fair point, Kiri conceded. Let's try something else. Over the next few days, they tried various approaches: meditation, mild intoxicants, even subliminal suggestions, all designed to bypass Caden's conscious resistance. Nothing produced significant results. On the fourth day, as they prepared for another session, Bishop returned from his surveillance duties with troubling news. They've expanded the search perimeter. Drones are now scanning the abandoned levels of the city. It's only a matter of time before they find us.
How much time?
Kiri asked, already moving to secure their most sensitive equipment. Days. Maybe less. Bishop pulled up a map on his portable display. They're being methodical, working from the outermost sectors inward. We need to move deeper or find a way off planet. Neither is an option right now, Kiri said. The only operational spaceport is the Alliance facility, and the deepest levels of the city collapsed years ago. We're running out of places to hide. Caden listened to their exchange with growing anxiety. These people had risked everything to help him, and now they were in danger because of it, because of him. The familiar weight of guilt settled on his shoulders, heavier than ever. I should turn myself in, he said finally. It's me they want. If I surrender, they might leave this area. Not a chance, Kiri replied immediately.
They'll tear this place apart looking for anyone who helped you. And you'd be giving them exactly what they want, Bishop added. A potential weapon they can study and eventually use.
Then, what do we do? Caden asked, frustration building. We can't fight the Alliance and we can't keep hiding forever. Bishop considered for a moment. There might be a third option. If we can prove that you can control this ability, whatever it is, then we have leverage. The Alliance wants a weapon they can control. If you can demonstrate that you're the only one who can control it, then I become too valuable to dissect. Caden finished the thought. But we've been trying for days. Whatever happened before, I can't recreate it.
Because you're afraid, Kiri said softly. You're afraid of what will happen if you let go. And with good reason. She approached him, her expression determined. But fear isn't going to save us now. We need the tide smile, Caden. We need you to embrace what you are.
Caden looked between them. These strangers who had become his only allies in a hostile universe. And what if what I am is exactly what the Alliance thinks? A mistake, a danger, human trash. Then we'll deal with that too, Bishop said, his voice steady. But right now, our options are running out along with our time. Before Caden could respond, an alarm sounded from Bishop's surveillance equipment. He moved quickly to check the display, his expression darkening. Proximity alert. Alliance drones. 1/2 kilometer from our position and closing.
How many?
Kiri asked, already moving to collect essential gear. At least a dozen. Standard search pattern. Bishop began shutting down systems, erasing any data that might be valuable to the Alliance. We have maybe 20 minutes before they reach this sector.
Where do we go?
Caden asked. Bishop pulled up a map of the abandoned city. There's an old maintenance bridge that crosses the central chasm. If we can reach the far side, we might be able to lose them in the industrial district. They gathered what they could carry and moved out, leaving the temporary safety of their hideout behind. The abandoned city was a maze of deteriorating structures and collapsed passageways, lit only by the occasional emergency light still drawing power from ancient generators. As they approached the central chasm, they could hear the whirring of drone engines echoing through the empty streets behind them. The sound spurred them to move faster, though they tried to stay quiet. The maintenance bridge was a narrow span of metal, stretching across a yawning abyss that divided the city. Far below, in the darkness, lay the remains of the original mining operation. The bridge itself was in poor condition, with sections of railing missing and the deck plates rusted through in places. "One at a time," Bishop instructed. "I'll go first to test it." He stepped onto the bridge, which swayed slightly under his weight. Carefully, he made his way across, testing each section before committing his full weight. After what seemed like an eternity, he reached the other side and signaled for Kiri to follow. She crossed more quickly, but with equal caution. As she neared the midpoint, a drone appeared at the entrance to the bridge, its scanning lights sweeping over the structure. "Down," Bishop called. Kiri dropped flat on the bridge deck as the drone's lights passed over her. For a tense moment, it hovered at the entrance, as if deciding whether to proceed onto the unstable structure. Then, apparently programmed to avoid unnecessary risks to expensive equipment, it moved along the chasm edge, continuing its search pattern elsewhere. Kiri scrambled the rest of the way across. And then it was Caden's turn. He stepped onto the bridge, feeling it shift beneath him. The metal groaned as he moved forward, placing each foot carefully on the center line where the structure was strongest. He was halfway across when Bishop's expression changed. Following the man's gaze, Caden looked back to see not drones, but armed Alliance security forces entering the far side of the bridge. At their head was a familiar figure in a black uniform, Commander Voska. "Run!" Kiri shouted. Caden abandoned caution and ran, the bridge swaying dangerously beneath him, behind him. He heard Voska ordering his men to hold their fire. They wanted him alive, after all. Just as he neared the far side, a section of decking gave way beneath his foot. Caden lurched forward, managing to grab a support strut as his legs dangled over the abyss. Bishop and Kiri reached for him, but they were still several meters away. "Hold on!" Kiri called, looking frantically for something to extend to him. Caden tried to pull himself up, but the metal strut was slick with condensation. His grip began to slip, below him. The darkness seemed infinite, promising a long fall and a sudden end. And then, inexplicably, a memory surfaced. His mother's garden in spring, sunlight filtering through cherry blossoms, the scent of fresh earth and growing things. A perfect moment of peace from a life that felt increasingly distant. A smile formed on his lips, unbidden and genuine. The bridge shuddered. Not a gentle vibration, but a violent tremor that ran through the entire structure. Metal shrieked as molecular bonds began to weaken. The laws of physics that held the bridge in place seemed to soften, becoming suggestions rather than imperatives. On the far side, Voska and his men stumbled as the bridge's anchor points began to tear free from the surrounding structures. "What's happening?" one of the soldiers shouted. Voska's eyes locked with Caden's across the distance. "It's him," the commander said, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos. "He's doing it." The bridge wasn't simply collapsing. It was dissolving, its very structure being pulled apart at a subatomic level. A golden light began to emanate from the disintegrating metal, illuminating the chasm. Bishop grabbed Caden's arm and hauled him up onto what remained of their side of the bridge. "We need to move! Now!" They ran as the dissolution followed them, the bridge disappearing into a swirling vortex of light and energy behind them. They barely made it to solid ground before the entire structure was gone, leaving a strange distortion in the air where it had been. A miniature wormhole that hung suspended for several seconds before collapsing in on itself with a thunderous crack. On the far side of the now impassable chasm, Voska stood with his men, watching as the phenomenon faded. His expression was a mixture of fear and covetous fascination. "You see it now, don't you?" he called across to Caden. "What you truly are." Before Caden could respond, Bishop pulled him away from the edge. "We need to move. They'll find another way across." As they retreated into the maze of the industrial district, Caden's mind reeled with what had just happened. There was no denying it now. His smile had somehow affected space-time itself, warping reality around him. "What am I?" he whispered, more to himself than his companions. "Something new," Kiri replied, her eyes bright with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Something they've never seen before." "Something dangerous," Bishop added grimly, "and something they'll never stop hunting now." The abandoned industrial district provided temporary shelter, but all three knew it was only a matter of time before the Alliance forces found a way to continue their pursuit. They took refuge in what had once been a processing facility, its massive machinery standing silent and rusted in the dim emergency lighting. As Kiri worked to establish a secure communication channel, hoping to contact potential allies off-world, Bishop kept watch while Caden sat alone, trying to process what had happened at the bridge. "It wasn't just a collapse," he said finally, breaking the silence. "The bridge didn't fall. It ceased to exist. The molecular structure unraveled." Bishop nodded. "I've never seen anything like it. Not even weapons designed to destabilize matter work that way." "I wasn't trying to destroy it," Caden insisted. "I was just—" He struggled to explain. "I remembered something good, something pure, my mother's garden," and I smiled. "Emotional state as a trigger," Bishop mused. "Consistent with the tide phenomenon theory. Positive emotions somehow allowing you to influence space-time at a fundamental level." "But why me? Why now?" Caden ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I've smiled before, not often in recent years. But it's happened. Why didn't I destroy wormholes every time?" "Maybe it's cumulative," Bishop suggested. "Building up over time. Or perhaps it requires specific circumstances, proximity to existing wormholes or space-time distortions. Or maybe you've always had the ability, but it was dormant until recently," Kiri called from her workstation. "Genetic traits can be activated by environmental factors, trauma, even radiation exposure. Working near wormholes for years might have changed you at a cellular level." Caden considered this. "If that's true, there could be others like me." "Let's hope not," Bishop said grimly. "One person who can collapse wormholes with a smile is enough of a problem." "I've got something," Kiri announced, drawing their attention. "I've accessed the Alliance's secure research database. They've been studying the tide phenomenon for decades, ever since the first wormhole network was established." Caden and Bishop moved to join her at the terminal, where complex scientific data scrolled across the screen. "According to this, certain individuals may possess a genetic marker that allows them to perceive and potentially influence the underlying structure of space-time," Kiri explained. "The Alliance has been testing for the marker in all potential wormhole engineers, screening out anyone who shows even a trace of it." "Except they missed me," Caden said. "No," Kiri corrected, pointing to a section of his personnel file. "They didn't miss it. They found it and classified you as minimal risk because the marker was present, but dormant." She scrolled to another section. "They've been watching you your entire career, waiting to see if the ability would manifest." Caden felt a cold fury building inside him. "They knew? All along?" "It gets worse," Kiri continued, her voice tight. "The Gamma Centauri incident, the wormhole collapse that you were blamed for. There are internal reports suggesting it was deliberately induced to test whether stress would activate your ability." 3 billion people, Caden whispered, the magnitude of the betrayal washing over him. "They sacrificed an entire planet to see if they could turn me into a weapon. And when it worked, they needed a scapegoat," Bishop added. "You were perfect, the engineer in charge, possessing the genetic marker, with no powerful connections to protect you. But something went wrong with their plan," Kiri said, reading further. "The activation was incomplete. Your ability manifested enough to cause the collapse, but not in a way they could study or replicate. So they sent you to Zalim, where they could monitor you under controlled conditions of stress and proximity to wormhole experiments." Caden stood abruptly, needing to move, to process this information. So, the recent test, the wormhole collapse that I supposedly caused.
Another attempt to activate and observe your ability, Kiri confirmed. But again, not quite what they expected. They want consistent, controllable results. You're giving them catastrophic, unpredictable ones. Which makes you a failed experiment from their perspective, Bishop concluded. And failed experiments are typically terminated once they've yielded all possible data. The implications were clear. Caden wasn't just being hunted. He was being harvested. The Alliance wanted whatever made him special, even if they had to take it from his corpse. We need to get off this planet, he said finally. If what you're saying is true, then I'm not just dangerous to the Alliance. I'm dangerous to everyone near a wormhole. And that's most of civilized space. I might have a solution, Kiri said, turning back to her terminal. There's an old cargo ship in the maintenance docks. It's outdated, but it has a functioning hyperdrive. If we can reach it and get it operational, we might be able to make it to the outer colonies. The Alliance will have the spaceport locked down, Bishop pointed out. Not the main spaceport, Kiri clarified. The original maintenance facility, from before the expansion. It's connected to this district by underground tunnels. Most of the ships there were abandoned when newer models came in, but some should still be functional. Bishop considered this. It's risky. Even if we reach the ship, taking off would alert every Alliance vessel in the system. We'll worry about that when we get there, Caden said, a new determination in his voice. Right now, we need to move. The longer we stay in one place, the easier it is for them to find us. As they gathered what supplies they could and prepared to move out, an alarm sounded from Kiri's terminal. Proximity alert, she said, checking the display. Multiple signatures. They've found another way across the chasm. Bishop consulted a map of the area. We need to reach access point C7. It's our best route to the maintenance tunnels. They moved quickly through the industrial complex, the sounds of Alliance search teams growing closer behind them. The access point, a heavy maintenance hatch in what had once been a factory floor, was sealed with decades of corrosion. Cover me, Bishop said, pulling tools from his pack. This will take a few minutes. Caden and Kiri took positions near the entrances to the vast room, watching for any sign of pursuit. The distant beam of a searchlight swept across a window, then disappeared. They're getting closer, Kiri whispered. Bishop worked methodically on the hatch, his movements efficient despite the time pressure. Almost there, he reported. The mechanism is intact, just seized up. A noise from a nearby corridor drew Caden's attention. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Bishop, he called softly. We're out of time. 1 more minute, the former officer replied, not looking up from his work. The footsteps grew louder. Caden could hear voices now. Alliance security forces coordinating their search pattern. Any moment, they would enter the factory floor and discover them. Bishop, he said again, more urgently. I know, Bishop replied, his voice tense. Just a few more seconds. The hatch released with a hiss of equalized pressure, swinging open to reveal a dark tunnel beyond. Go, Bishop ordered. Both of you. I'll be right behind you. Kiri didn't hesitate, slipping through the hatch and starting down the tunnel. Caden moved to follow but paused, looking back at Bishop, who was collecting his tools with deliberate care. What are you doing? Caden asked. We need to go. Now! Bishop met his gaze, his expression resolute. Someone needs to make sure this hatch is sealed behind you, properly sealed, so they can't follow immediately. Understanding dawned on Caden. No, we go together. There's no time to argue, Bishop said. The mechanism needs to be disabled from this side. If they follow us into those tunnels, we're trapped. The voices were at the entrance to the factory floor now. Any second, the Alliance forces would spot them. Go,
Bishop repeated, drawing a weapon from beneath his jacket. Find a way to use what you are, Caden. Don't let them turn it into a weapon. Before Caden could protest further, Kiri's hand reached back through the hatch, grabbing his arm and pulling him into the tunnel. We have to go, she insisted. He's made his choice. The last thing Caden saw as the hatch swung shut was Bishop turning to face the entrance, weapon raised. Then the heavy metal, sealed with a dull thud, and they were plunged into darkness broken only by the dim glow of emergency strips along the tunnel floor. Come on, Kiri urged, already moving deeper into the tunnel. We can't waste his sacrifice. Caden followed, guilt weighing on him as they hurried through the abandoned maintenance passages. Behind them, they heard the muffled sound of weapons fire, then silence. The tunnels were a labyrinth, but Kiri navigated them with surprising confidence, referring occasionally to a small, holographic map projected from a device on her wrist. I studied the old city plans when I first came to Zalim, she explained as they moved. Most people forget that places have histories, layers built upon layers. How did you end up here? Caden asked, partly to distract himself from thoughts of Bishop's fate. I was tracking wormhole anomalies, she replied. I'm what you might call a wormhole hacker. I find weaknesses in the network, exploit them for faster travel, sometimes for profit. She glanced back at him. The Alliance doesn't appreciate my work. You're a criminal, Caden said, without judgment. I prefer independent researcher, Kiri corrected, with a hint of a smile. But, yes, according to Alliance law, they don't like anyone messing with their precious network, especially not someone who proves it's less secure than they claim. They continued in silence for a time, the tunnel gradually widening as they approached what Kiri assured him was the old maintenance facility. Finally, they reached a massive pressure door that marked the boundary between the tunnels and the docking area. This is it, Kiri said, examining the control panel. Power's still on, which is a good sign. She input a series of commands, and the door began to slide open with a grinding protest of neglected mechanisms. Beyond lay a cavernous space, housing dozens of spacecraft in various states of disrepair. Most were cargo haulers, bulky, utilitarian vessels designed for transporting materials rather than people. There, Kiri pointed to a ship near the far wall. That's our best bet. Helios-class transport. Older model, but reliable. And more importantly, its registration was never properly decommissioned in the Alliance database. Meaning what? Caden asked, as they made their way across the facility. Meaning we might be able to bluff our way past initial identification protocols, she explained. Get far enough from the planet before they realize the ship shouldn't be active. As they approached the vessel, Caden could see that it had indeed been neglected for years, its hull dulled by dust and minor corrosion. But the basic structure appeared sound, and when Kiri accessed the external control panel, the ship's systems responded. Main power is operational, she reported, relief evident in her voice. Life support, navigation, propulsion, all reading as functional, if not optimal. The ship's main hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure, revealing a Spartan interior designed for functionality rather than comfort. The cockpit was forward, with a small crew area behind it, followed by a large cargo bay that comprised most of the vessel's volume. Can you fly this? Caden asked as they entered the cockpit. In theory, Kiri replied, settling into the pilot's seat and beginning the pre-flight sequence. I've flown similar models. The basic controls haven't changed much in 50 years. Caden took the co-pilot's seat, watching as systems came online one by one. Despite everything, he felt a surge of hope. If they could escape Salim, perhaps they could find somewhere beyond Alliance space, somewhere he couldn't endanger others with his unpredictable ability. That hope was short-lived. As the ship's sensors activated, They revealed multiple Alliance vessels in orbit around Zalim, including a command carrier that could only belong to the 7th Fleet.
"They've blockaded the planet," Kiri said, her voice tight. "Standard procedure when hunting high-value fugitives?"
"Can we slip past them?" Caden asked. "In this?" Kiri gestured to the ship's outdated systems. "Not a chance. They'd detect us the moment we left atmosphere, and we'd be tractored or vaporized before we could spin up the hyperdrive." Caden's mind raced, searching for options. "What about a distraction? Something to draw their attention while we make a run for it?"
"It would have to be something significant to divert a fleet," Kiri replied, still working through the pre-flight checklist despite the apparent hopelessness of their situation. A thought occurred to Caden then. A terrible, dangerous thought. What if we used my ability, created a space-time distortion large enough to concern them? Kiri looked at him sharply. "You can barely control it. The last time you smiled, you turned a bridge into a miniature wormhole. What happens if you try to do it deliberately, on a larger scale?"
"I don't know," Caden admitted, "but it's the only advantage we have." Before Kiri could respond, the facility's ancient alarm system activated, red warning lights pulsing throughout the cavernous space. "They've found the tunnels," Kiri said, her fingers flying over the controls. "We're out of time for debate. Can you do it or not?" Caden closed his eyes, trying to center himself. Could he deliberately trigger the effect that had thus far only happened spontaneously? And if he could he control it? "I can try," he said finally. "But we need to be ready to move the instant it happens. And I need something to focus on. Something that might trigger a genuine emotional response." Kiri nodded, completing the final preparations for launch. "The facility doors are sealed, but I can override them from here. Once they're open, we'll have seconds to clear the hangar before they can react." Caden took a deep breath, trying to summon the feeling that had triggered his ability before. He thought of his mother's garden, but the memory felt distant now, its emotional impact dulled by repetition and the stress of their situation. "It's not working," he said after a moment.
"I can't force it."
The sound of weapons fire echoed through the facility. Alliance forces had breached the outer doors and were making their way toward the ship. "We need to go now," Kiri urged, "with or without your space-time trick." She activated the ship's engines, which roared to life with surprising power given their age. The vessel lifted off the hangar floor, hovering as Kiri oriented it toward the massive doors that led to the surface.
"Hold on,"
she warned, punching the command to open the facility doors. They began to part slowly, revealing a glimpse of Zalim's barren surface beyond. As the gap widened, Caden could see Alliance security forces entering the far side of the hangar, Commander Voska at their head. The commander spotted their ship immediately and raised his hand, ordering his men to open fire. Energy bolts struck the ship's hull, most dissipating against its shields, but a few penetrating to score the aged metal. The vessel shuddered under the assault. "Shields at 60%, Kiri reported, her voice tense. "We need to move before they bring in heavier weapons." But the doors weren't opening fast enough. At their current rate, it would be another 30 seconds before the gap was wide enough for the ship to pass through, time they didn't have as more Alliance forces poured into the hangar. Caden watched in mounting desperation as their situation deteriorated. They had come so close to escape, only to be trapped at the final moment. The unfairness of it all, after everything he'd endured, after Bishop's sacrifice, struck him with surprising force. And then, unexpectedly, he thought of Bishop, not with guilt or grief, but with gratitude. A man who had chosen to stand and fight so that others might have a chance at freedom. A man who believed that Caden's ability could be more than a weapon, that it could mean something. A smile formed on Caden's lips, not forced but genuine. A smile of appreciation for an act of selfless courage. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The hangar doors, which had been slowly parting, suddenly shimmered with golden light. The metal didn't melt or disintegrate. It simply ceased to exist as solid matter, transforming into a swirling vortex of energy that expanded rapidly to fill the doorway. "What the hell?" Kiri exclaimed, her hands frozen on the controls. Where the doors had been, there was now what appeared to be a stable wormhole entrance. Its event horizon, a perfect circle of darkness surrounded by a corona of golden energy. Caden stared in shock. He hadn't destroyed the doors. He had transformed them into a passage. "It's a wormhole," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I created a wormhole." "To where?" Kiri demanded, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. As if in answer, the ship's sensors beeped, analyzing the phenomenon. "Coordinates indicate the Kaiser black hole," Kiri read from the display. "That's over 20 light-years from here." The Alliance forces had ceased fire, clearly as astonished as they were by what had just happened. Commander Voska stepped forward, his expression a mixture of awe and covetousness. "Take us through," Caden said suddenly. "Are you insane?" Kiri responded. "It leads to a black hole." "To the vicinity of a black hole," Caden corrected. "The Kaiser black hole is surrounded by a navigation beacon network. It's one of the primary wormhole junctions in the Alliance network." He met her gaze. "I know it. I helped design the stabilization field." Kiri hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "All right. Hold on to something." She accelerated the ship forward, directly toward the swirling vortex. Behind them, Commander Voska shouted orders, but it was too late. The ship crossed the event horizon, and the hangar disappeared, replaced by the disorienting non-space of wormhole transit. For several seconds, reality seemed to bend around them. Light stretched and compressed, creating patterns that human eyes were never meant to process. Caden felt a pressure in his mind, as if his consciousness was being squeezed through a space too small to contain it. And then, abruptly, they were through. The ship emerged into open space, stars wheeling around them as Kiri fought to stabilize their trajectory. "We made it," she said, her voice tight with the effort of controlling the ship. "We're in the Kaiser system." Caden looked at the navigation display. Sure enough, they were near the Kaiser black hole, a massive gravitational anomaly that the Alliance had surrounded with a network of navigation beacons and wormhole stabilizers. It was one of the busiest transit hubs in Alliance space, with dozens of wormhole routes connecting here from throughout the galaxy. "The wormhole is collapsing behind us," Kiri reported, checking the sensors. "No pursuit possible through that route." Caden allowed himself a moment of relief before reality reasserted itself. "We're still in Alliance space. In fact, we're in one of the most heavily monitored sectors of Alliance space." "True," Kiri agreed, already plotting a course away from the black hole's gravitational influence. "But we have a head start, and they won't expect us to be here. It will take time for the alert to spread from Zalim." "Where do we go now?" Caden asked. Kiri considered for a moment. "The outer colonies, beyond Alliance jurisdiction. We can lose ourselves there while we figure out our next move." As she set the course, Caden stared out at the stars, his mind still trying to process what had happened. He hadn't simply destabilized spacetime this time. He had shaped it, created a controlled wormhole that transported them exactly where they needed to go. "How did you do it?" Kiri asked, as if reading his thoughts. "Create a stable wormhole instead of just collapsing one?" "I don't know," Caden admitted. "It felt different this time. Less like breaking something and more like reshaping it, bending reality rather than tearing it." "The emotional trigger was different," Kiri suggested. "Before, your smiles were about personal memories or momentary happiness. This time, it was about something bigger, appreciation for sacrifice, for courage." Caden nodded slowly. "Maybe the emotion affects the outcome. Shallow happiness creates destruction, But deeper emotions, connection, gratitude, purpose, create something new. It was a theory, nothing more. But it felt right, somehow. It suggested that his ability wasn't simply a weapon of mass destruction. It could be something more, something constructive. As the ship accelerated toward the edge of the system, where they could safely activate the hyperdrive without being detected, Caden's thoughts turned to the wider implications. If he could learn to control this ability, to channel it constructively, what might be possible? Could he create stable wormholes without the massive infrastructure the Alliance required? Could he open routes to parts of the galaxy previously unreachable? And what would the Alliance do to possess such power? The answer came sooner than expected. As they approached the jump point, the ship's sensors detected multiple vessels moving to intercept. Alliance warships, mobilizing from the nearby patrol station. "They've found us already," Kiri said, her voice tight. Someone must have recognized the ship's signature. "Can we outrun them?" Caden asked. "Not a chance. This ship wasn't built for speed." Kiri's fingers flew over the controls, searching for options. "We need another wormhole. Caden, can you do it again?" Caden closed his eyes, trying to recapture the feeling that had allowed him to create the first wormhole. But the pressure of the moment, the fear of capture, made it impossible to summon genuine positive emotion. "I can't," he admitted. "Not on command. Not like this." Kiri nodded, unsurprised. "Then we need another plan." She studied the tactical display, which showed the Alliance vessels closing rapidly. "Wait, look at this." She highlighted a section of space near their position. "There's a civilian transport convoy passing through the system. If we can reach it and blend in, we might be able to avoid detection long enough to reach the jump point." It was a desperate plan, but better than no plan at all. Kiri adjusted their course, pushing the old ship's engines to their limits as they raced toward the convoy. The Alliance vessels adjusted their intercept course accordingly. But their caution in approaching what they still considered a dangerous, unpredictable target gave the fugitives a slight advantage. As they neared the convoy, a collection of transport and passenger vessels traveling under Alliance escort, Kiri activated the ship's transponder, broadcasting civilian identification codes that would hopefully allow them to blend in with the legitimate traffic. "Will that work?" Caden asked, watching as the distance to the Alliance pursuers steadily decreased. "Maybe. For a little while," Kiri replied. "The codes are outdated but still registered as valid in the system. It might buy us enough time to reach the jump point." For a few tense minutes, it seemed the plan might succeed. They approached the outer edges of the convoy, their transponder signal accepted without challenge. The Alliance pursuit vessels slowed, apparently uncertain which ship in the growing cluster of vessels was their target. Then, a communication alert sounded from the ship's console. "They're hailing all vessels in the convoy," Kiri reported, ordering a security check. Before they could decide how to respond, a new alert blared from the sensors. "Multiple wormholes forming," Kiri announced, her voice rising in alarm. "It's the 7th Fleet. They must have jumped directly from Zalim." Caden watched in growing despair as Alliance warships emerged from the newly formed wormholes, their weapon systems already powering up. At the center of the formation was a massive command carrier, Commander Voska's flagship. "We're trapped," Kiri said, stating the obvious. "They've cut off all escape routes." A communication signal overrode their ship's systems, and Commander Voska's face appeared on their main display. "Prisoner 756 ABX, he said, his voice cold and formal. "This pursuit has gone on long enough. You have nowhere to run. Surrender now, and the Alliance may show mercy to your accomplice." Caden and Kiri exchanged glances. They both knew what mercy meant in Alliance terms, a quick execution rather than a prolonged one. "What do we do?" Kiri asked quietly. Caden stared at the tactical display, which showed their ship surrounded by Alliance vessels. There was indeed nowhere to run. Unless… "The black hole," he said suddenly. "Take us back toward the Kaiser black hole."
"Are you insane?" Curie demanded. "We can't outrun them. And even if we could, getting too close to the black hole means we'd never escape its gravity well."
"Trust me," Caden said, meeting her gaze. "I have an idea." After a moment's hesitation, Curie nodded and altered their course, sending the ship diving back toward the massive gravitational anomaly at the center of the system. As expected, the Alliance vessels followed, maintaining a safe distance but ensuring they couldn't escape. "They think we're making a suicide run," Curie observed as they accelerated toward the black hole. "They'll hang back until the last possible moment, then try to tractor us before we cross the event horizon." "That's what I'm counting on," Caden replied. "Get us as close as you can to the navigation beacon network without crossing into the danger zone." Curie followed his instructions, guiding the ship toward the cluster of automated beacons that surrounded the black hole at a safe distance. These beacons formed a perimeter around the danger zone, providing navigational data to ships using the wormhole hub and warning them away from the gravitational point of no return. "What's your plan?" Curie asked as they approached the beacon network. "The beacons are connected to the Alliance wormhole network," Caden explained. "They're designed to stabilize space-time in the vicinity of the black hole, creating a safe zone for wormhole formation. If I can affect them somehow—" "You could destabilize the entire network," Curie finished, understanding dawning. "But that would be catastrophic. The wormhole hub here connects dozens of star systems." "I know," Caden said grimly. "But right now, it's our only option." As they reached the beacon perimeter, the Alliance vessels began to close in, realizing that they weren't on a suicide run after all. A tractor beam from the nearest cruiser locked onto their ship, beginning to slow their momentum.
"Now or never!
Caden," Curie said, fighting the controls as the tractor beam grew stronger. Caden closed his eyes, focusing on what he needed to do. He thought about Bishop's sacrifice, about the billions who had died on Gamma Centauri, because the Alliance wanted to turn him into a weapon. He thought about all the human trash like himself, their lives discarded for the greater glory of the Alliance. But those thoughts brought anger, not the positive emotion he needed to shape his ability constructively. Forcing himself to push past the rage, he searched deeper, looking for something worth smiling about, even in this desperate moment. And then he found it, not in memory, but in the present, in Curie's determination, her willingness to fight against impossible odds, in the brief friendship he'd formed with Bishop, in the knowledge that even at the edge of defeat, they had chosen freedom over submission. A smile spread across his face, genuine and heartfelt. The effect was immediate, but not what he had expected. Instead of the beacons collapsing or forming a destructive wormhole, they began to pulse with golden light, the same energy he had seen during his previous manifestations. The light spread from beacon to beacon, forming a network of glowing connections around the black hole.
"What's happening?"
Curie asked, her voice hushed with awe. The tractor beam holding their ship suddenly failed as the Alliance cruiser's systems were affected by whatever was happening to the beacon network. On their sensors, they could see the other Alliance vessels experiencing similar disruptions: power fluctuations, navigation errors, communication failures. And then, at the center of it all, the black hole itself began to change. The accretion disk surrounding it brightened, shifting from its usual blue-white to the same golden hue that emanated from the beacons. The event horizon, normally invisible to the naked eye, became a visible boundary of swirling energy. "This is impossible," Curie whispered, staring at the readings on their sensors. "The black hole's gravitational signature is changing. It's stabilizing." Caden watched in amazement as the impossible continued to unfold. The black hole wasn't collapsing or growing more destructive. It was transforming into something else entirely. A controlled singularity, its immense gravitational power harnessed and directed, rather than simply devouring everything in its path. And around it, wormholes began to form spontaneously, dozens of them, opening like flowers in a time-lapse video. But unlike Alliance wormholes, with their cold, blue-white energy signatures, these glowed with the same golden light that now suffused the entire region. "They're stable," Kiri reported, checking the ship's sensors. "More stable than any Alliance wormhole I've ever seen. And they're connecting to everywhere. Not just Alliance space, but beyond, unexplored regions, the outer colonies, even systems that were thought unreachable." On their communication channel, they could hear the panic in the Alliance fleet as officers reported the unprecedented phenomenon. Commander Voska's voice cut through the chatter, ordering his ships to withdraw to a safe distance while maintaining their blockade. "Can we use one of these new wormholes to escape?" Caden asked, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining his focus. Kiri nodded, already plotting a course. "I'm detecting one that leads to the outer rim. If we can reach it before the Alliance regroups..." She guided their ship toward the nearest golden wormhole, accelerating away from the confused Alliance vessels. Behind them, the transformation of the Kaiser black hole continued. The controlled singularity, now serving as the hub for a new kind of wormhole network, one not constrained by Alliance infrastructure or control. As they approached the wormhole, Caden felt a strange connection to it, as if it were an extension of himself. "I can feel it," he said. "It's waiting for us." They crossed the event horizon, the golden energy enveloping their ship in a gentle embrace that was nothing like the disorienting experience of traditional wormhole transit. This passage felt natural, smooth, as if they were flowing along a river of light rather than being forced through a tear in space-time. Seconds later, they emerged into unfamiliar space. The stars here were arranged in patterns Caden didn't recognize, and the ship's navigation system struggled to identify their location. "We're beyond Alliance space," Kiri confirmed, checking the long-range sensors. "Way beyond. This is the outer rim, uncharted territory, for the most part." Caden finally allowed himself to relax, the tension of the past days releasing in a long exhale. "We made it." "We did more than that," Kiri said, turning to face him with an expression of wonder. "You did more than that. You didn't just create a wormhole this time. You created a whole new network. You transformed a black hole from a destroyer into a creator." Caden looked out at the unfamiliar stars, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. "Will it last?" "I don't know," Kiri admitted. "But even if it's temporary, you've shown what's possible. The Alliance's monopoly on wormhole technology was just broken wide open." The implications were staggering. For centuries, the Pearl Galaxy Alliance had maintained control through its exclusive mastery of wormhole technology. Planets and star systems either submitted to Alliance rule or remained isolated, cut off from the greater galactic community. But if what Caden had done could be replicated or sustained— "Freedom," he said softly. "Real freedom of movement. Not just for us, but for everyone. And the Alliance will do everything in their power to stop it," Kiri added, her expression sobering. "They'll hunt you with everything they have now. You're not just a curiosity or a potential weapon anymore. You're an existential threat to their entire power structure." Caden nodded, accepting this new reality. "Then, we need to stay ahead of them. Find a safe haven where I can learn to control this ability properly." "I know some people in the outer colonies who might help," Kiri said. "Researchers, scientists who left the Alliance rather than submit to their restrictions on wormhole studies. If anyone can help you understand what you can do, it's them." As they set course for the nearest inhabited system in this uncharted region, Caden looked back at the golden wormhole through which they had escaped. It remained open, a beacon of possibility in the darkness of space. For the first time since the Gamma Centauri disaster, He allowed himself to feel something like hope. Whatever he was, whatever this ability meant, it wasn't just destruction. It could create as well as destroy, connect as well as sever. Perhaps, after all, there was a reason he had been labeled human trash and cast aside. Not because he was worthless, but because he represented something the Alliance feared more than anything: the democratization of power, the end of control, the beginning of freedom. The planet had no official name, just a designation in old star charts as HC-271b. Its inhabitants, a loose coalition of scientists, engineers, and refugees from Alliance space, called it Sunrise Station. Located at the edge of what was generally considered habitable space, it was remote enough to avoid Alliance attention, while still accessible enough for the occasional supply ship or new arrival. 3 months had passed since Caden and Kiri's dramatic escape from the Kaiser system. In that time, news had filtered through even to this distant outpost about the transformation of the Kaiser black hole and the spontaneous wormhole network that had formed around it. The Alliance had quarantined the entire system, declaring it off-limits due to dangerous space-time anomalies. But reports suggested that the golden wormholes remained stable, connecting previously isolated regions of space in defiance of Alliance control. Caden had spent these months working with Dr. Alara Vex, a former Alliance wormhole physicist who had fled to the outer colonies years ago rather than submit her research to military control. Together, they had been trying to understand the nature of his ability and how to control it more reliably. "The key appears to be emotional resonance," Dr. Vex explained during one of their sessions in her laboratory, a converted cargo bay filled with improvised equipment. "Your ability manifests most powerfully when your positive emotions align with a larger purpose or connection." Caden nodded, having come to a similar conclusion through their experiments. Personal happiness creates small effects, connection to others, to larger ideals, that creates the more significant manifestations. "Precisely," Dr. Vex agreed, "which suggests that this isn't merely a genetic anomaly. As the Alliance believed, it's an evolutionary development, a new way for consciousness to interact with the fundamental structure of spacetime." Their research had progressed steadily, with Caden gradually learning to produce small, controlled spacetime effects without the dramatic consequences of his earlier manifestations. He could now create localized distortions, miniature wormholes that could transport small objects across the laboratory, temporary pockets of altered time that could accelerate or slow processes within a confined area. But the larger applications, the creation of stable, interstellar wormholes like the one that had formed at Kaiser, remained beyond his consistent control. Such manifestations still required intense emotional triggers that couldn't be manufactured on command. On this particular day, Caden was taking a break from his training, sitting on a ridge overlooking the settlement. Sunrise Station was a collection of prefabricated structures and repurposed spacecraft nestled in a valley surrounded by red rock formations. It wasn't beautiful in any conventional sense, but to Caden, who had spent years in the industrial wasteland of Zalim, it was paradise. Kiri found him there, climbing the ridge to sit beside him as the system's distant sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley. "Dr. Vex says you're making progress," she said, offering him a container of water. Caden took a drink before responding. "Small steps. I can move a cup across a room without breaking it now." He smiled wryly. "Not exactly revolutionary." "It's still more than anyone else can do," Kiri pointed out. "And the fact that you can control it at all is significant." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the settlement below as its inhabitants went about their evening routines. In the months since their arrival, they had been accepted into this community of outcasts and freethinkers, many of whom had their own reasons to avoid Alliance attention. "Any news from the relay station?" Caden asked eventually. Sunrise Station maintained a discreet communications outpost
that monitored Alliance transmissions and kept in touch with a network of similar settlements throughout the outer colonies. Kiri nodded, her expression growing serious. The Kaiser network is still operational. The Alliance has been unable to dismantle it or block access to the wormholes. In fact, she hesitated, as if unsure how to continue. "What is it?" Caden prompted. "The network is growing," she said. "New wormholes are appearing, connecting to other black holes throughout the galaxy. It's as if what you started has taken on a life of its own, spreading like—" She searched for the right comparison. "Like a smile," Caden suggested quietly. "Yes," Kiri agreed. "Like a smile spreading across the face of the galaxy." The implications were both exhilarating and terrifying. If the network continued to expand without his direct involvement, it could fundamentally alter the power structure of the galaxy. The Alliance's control over interstellar travel, the foundation of their authority, would be irrevocably undermined. "There's something else," Kiri continued after a moment. "The Alliance has officially designated you as Public Enemy 1. They're calling you the Tide Smile now, the man who breaks reality with a grin. There's a bounty on your head that would buy a small planet." Caden absorbed this information without surprise. He had expected nothing less. "And you?" he asked. "Are you on their list too?" "Oh, I'm there," Kiri confirmed with a hint of pride. "Though considerably lower in the rankings. Apparently, helping you escape doesn't compare to reshaping the fundamental structure of space-time." Despite the gravity of their situation, Caden found himself smiling at her mock indignation. Their friendship had deepened during their months in exile, evolving into something that neither of them had put into words yet, but which provided a solid foundation amid the uncertainty of their circumstances. The moment was interrupted by an alarm from the settlement below, 3 long tones that indicated an unscheduled arrival. They both rose immediately, all levity forgotten. "Could be nothing," Kiri said as they made their way down the ridge toward the settlement. "A trader off course, or new refugees. Or it could be the Alliance," Caden replied, giving voice to their shared fear. They reached the settlement's perimeter in time to see a small crowd gathering near the communication center. Dr. Vex was among them, her tall figure easily recognizable. She spotted them and waved them over urgently. "What is it?" Caden asked as they joined the group. "A distress signal," Dr. Vex explained, her voice tight with concern. "From a civilian transport near the Helios Nebula. They're under attack by Alliance forces." "Why would the Alliance attack a civilian transport?" Kiri asked. A technician from the communications center answered. "According to the transmission, they were attempting to use one of the new wormholes, the Golden Network. The Alliance has apparently begun interdicting any vessels that try to access the network." "How far is the Helios Nebula?" Caden asked. "Too far for conventional travel from here," Dr. Vex replied. "At least 3 weeks at maximum speed. By the time anyone could reach them—" She left the implication hanging. Caden exchanged a look with Kiri, seeing his own thought reflected in her eyes. "There might be another way," he said. Dr. Vex understood immediately. "You're talking about creating a wormhole directly to their location. Caden, you've never attempted anything like that before. Not consciously. Not with such precision." "I have to try," Caden insisted. "If the Alliance is attacking civilians for using the network I created, then I'm responsible." "You're not responsible for the Alliance's actions," Kiri argued. "They've been oppressing people for centuries before you came along." "But I changed the equation," Caden countered. "I gave people hope, showed them an alternative. If they're being punished for that hope—" He shook his head. "I have to help if I can." After a brief debate, a plan was formed. They would use Sunrise Station's most spaceworthy vessel, a refurbished Alliance scout ship that had been liberated by one of the settlement's more adventurous residents, to reach low orbit. From there, Caden would attempt to create a wormhole directly to the coordinates provided in the distress signal.
If this works, Dr. Vex cautioned as they prepared the ship, it will confirm to the Alliance that you're alive and active. They'll intensify their search. They already believe I'm behind the Kaiser network, Caden replied. This won't tell them anything they don't already suspect. Within an hour, they were ready. The scout ship, renamed Liberty by its current owner, carried Caden, Kiri, Dr. Vex, and a small crew of volunteers from the settlement. As they broke atmosphere and reached stable orbit, tension filled the cramped cockpit. Distress signal is still active, reported the communications officer. But it's weakening. They may not have much time left. Caden sat in the center of the cockpit, eyes closed in concentration. Around him, the crew maintained a respectful silence, understanding the difficulty of what he was attempting. Creating a wormhole on command, with a specific destination thousands of light years away, was far beyond anything he had managed in their controlled experiments. But he had to try. Lives depended on it. He focused on the coordinates, trying to visualize the region of space where the civilian transport was under attack. But abstract numbers and astronomical designations provided little emotional connection. He needed something more, something to trigger the genuine positive emotion that powered his most significant manifestations. "Tell me about the people on that transport," he said suddenly, opening his eyes to look at the communications officer. "Who are they? Why were they trying to use the Golden Network?" The officer consulted his display. According to their identification broadcast, they're refugees from the Orion sector, mostly families. The Alliance restricted travel in that region after local protests against resource extraction policies. He looked up. They were trying to reach the outer colonies, trying to find freedom. Freedom. The word resonated with Caden. He thought of his own journey from prisoner to fugitive to whatever he was becoming now. He thought of all those who had helped him along the way, especially Bishop, who had sacrificed himself so that Caden might escape. He thought of the families on that transport, seeking only the chance to determine their own fate. A smile formed on his lips, not forced, but arising naturally from a sense of connection to these strangers and their struggle. A struggle he understood intimately. The effect began subtly, a shimmer in the space before the ship, a gentle distortion of the starfield. Then, with growing intensity, a spiral of golden energy formed, expanding outward to create a perfect circle of radiant light. "It's working," Kiri whispered, her hand finding his shoulder in a gesture of support. The wormhole stabilized, its event horizon a pool of darkness surrounded by the now familiar golden glow. Unlike Alliance wormholes, with their sterile blue-white energy signature, this one seemed almost alive, pulsing with a rhythm that matched Caden's heartbeat. "Sensors indicate a stable space-time aperture," Dr. Vex reported, her scientific detachment unable to completely mask her awe. "Destination coordinates match the Helios Nebula region. Remarkable precision, Caden." "Take us through," Kiri ordered the pilot, who looked to Caden for confirmation. He nodded, maintaining his focus on the wormhole. As the ship moved forward and crossed the event horizon, Caden felt none of the disorientation that normally accompanied wormhole transit. Instead, there was a sense of rightness, of moving along a path that had always existed, but had simply been waiting to be revealed. Seconds later, they emerged into a scene of chaos. A civilian transport, bulky and outdated, but clearly designed for passenger capacity rather than cargo, was under attack by two Alliance patrol vessels. The transport's shields were failing, energy discharges from the patrol vessel's weapons creating spiderweb patterns of overload across its hull. "Hail the Alliance vessels," Kiri commanded. "Are you insane?" the communications officer responded. "They'll attack us too." "Just do it," she insisted, "and put it on wide broadcast." As the officer complied, Kiri turned to Caden. "Can you maintain the wormhole? Keep it open behind us." Caden nodded, though the effort was beginning to strain him. Creating the wormhole had been demanding enough. Keeping it stable required continuous focus. The communication channel opened, and Kiri addressed the Alliance vessels. Alliance Patrol, this is the independent vessel Liberty. Cease your attack on the civilian transport immediately. There was a moment of stunned silence before a response came. Unidentified vessel. This is Alliance Patrol 7 Delta. This is a restricted area. Withdraw immediately or be fired upon. I don't think you understand the situation, Kiri replied, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Look behind us. On their view screen, they could see the Alliance vessel's sensors registering the wormhole, a phenomenon that shouldn't exist without massive infrastructure to support it. That wormhole leads directly to a settlement in the outer colonies, Kiri continued. And we're not alone. We have friends, many friends, who can create these passages anywhere, anytime. The days of Alliance control over interstellar travel are over. It was a bluff. Of course. Caden was the only one with this ability, and maintaining even this single wormhole was pushing the limits of his endurance. But the Alliance didn't know that. There was a longer pause before the response came, this time from a different voice, older, more authoritative. This is Commander Voska of the 7th Fleet. I know who you are, fugitive Kiri Valen, and I know who's with you, the Tide Smile himself. Do you think one wormhole will change anything? The Alliance has stood for centuries. It will not be undone by a few rebels and an aberration of nature. Caden felt a chill at hearing the commander's voice again. Their last encounter at Kaisar had clearly not diminished the man's determination to capture him. Maybe not, Kiri conceded. But this aberration has already transformed the Kaisar black hole into a free transit hub that you can't shut down. And now he's here, opening another route. How long before the entire galaxy is connected by wormholes you can't control? On the view screen, they could see the civilian transport taking advantage of the distraction to limp toward the wormhole. The Alliance patrol vessels, momentarily uncertain, had ceased their attack. You're making a mistake, Valen. Commander Voska replied, his voice cold. The Alliance doesn't negotiate with terrorists or harbor fugitives. This changes nothing. It changes everything, Kiri countered. And deep down, you know it. The question is whether you're on the right side of history. There was no response this time. On the tactical display, they could see the Alliance vessels powering up their weapon systems again. They're going to fire, the tactical officer warned. Get the transport through the wormhole, Caden ordered, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining the space-time distortion. Now! The Liberty moved to position itself between the Alliance vessels and the civilian transport, using its own shields to absorb the initial volley of energy weapons. The impact sent tremors through the small ship, but its defenses held, barely. Shields at 40%, reported the tactical officer. They're preparing for another volley. The civilian transport had reached the wormhole but was hesitating at the threshold. They're afraid to enter, the communications officer explained. They've never seen anything like it before. Tell them it's safe, Caden said. Tell them it's their way to freedom. As the message was relayed, the transport finally committed, crossing the event horizon and disappearing into the Golden Passage. Moments later, confirmation came from Sunrise Station. The vessel had arrived safely. Now us, Kiri said, turning to the pilot. Before they can... Her words were cut off by another impact, this one much more severe. The Liberty shuddered, warning lights flashing across all control panels. Direct hit to our propulsion system, the tactical officer reported. We've lost main drive. Auxiliary power failing. Through the view screen, they could see the Alliance vessels closing in, preparing to capture rather than destroy them, now that the civilian transport had escaped. We need to go through the wormhole, Dr. Vex urged. Now, while it's still stable. But Caden knew they wouldn't make it. The Liberty was crippled, drifting in space. The Alliance vessels would intercept them before they could reach the wormhole, even with auxiliary power. Unless... I have an idea, he said, his voice quiet but determined. "But I need everyone to trust me." Kiri met his gaze, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You're going to bring the wormhole to us." Caden nodded. "I'm going to try, but it means letting go of the current one first. The refugees are safe. Now we need to save ourselves." After a moment's consideration, Kiri nodded. "Do it." Caden closed his eyes, releasing his hold on the distant wormhole. He felt it collapse, the golden energy dissipating back into the fabric of space-time. Then, focusing all his remaining strength, he concentrated on creating a new aperture, one that would form directly around their ship, enveloping it completely. This was different from creating a wormhole at a distance. This required reshaping the space-time they currently occupied, not just punching a hole through it. The level of precision needed was enormous. A mistake could tear the Liberty apart at a molecular level. But as he had learned over the past months, his ability wasn't about destruction. It was about connection, about finding the natural pathways that existed within the seemingly solid structure of reality. Thinking of his companions, of the trust they had placed in him, Caden smiled. Not from happiness exactly, but from a profound sense of belonging, of being part of something larger than himself, something worth fighting for. The golden light began to form within the ship itself, emanating from Caden and spreading outward to envelop the entire vessel. Through the view screen, they could see the Alliance ships suddenly backing away, their commanders apparently recognizing what was happening. Space-time distortion forming," Dr. Vex reported, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "It's unlike anything I've ever seen. The wormhole is forming around us, not in front of us." The effect intensified, the interior of the ship now suffused with golden light. Through the view screen, they could see reality itself beginning to fold around them, stars stretching into lines as space-time curved in impossible ways. "Caden!" Kiri's voice reached him through his deep concentration. "Where are we going?" He hadn't specified a destination. He realized. In his focus on the technique itself, he had neglected to determine where the wormhole would lead. Now, as the transit began, he had to choose, quickly. An image formed in his mind, not of Sunrise Station, which the Alliance might now be able to track, but of somewhere new, somewhere they could begin again, with the knowledge they had gained and the freedom they had fought for. The transition completed with a flash of golden light, and suddenly, the stars outside the view screen had rearranged themselves into an unfamiliar pattern. The Liberty drifted in space, its systems gradually recovering from the unprecedented method of transit. "Where are we?" Dr. Vex asked, checking the ship's sensors. "This doesn't match any known star system in our database." Caden opened his eyes, exhausted but satisfied. "Somewhere new," he said simply. "Somewhere beyond Alliance space, beyond the known wormhole network. Somewhere we can build something better." As the ship's systems came back online and they began to assess their surroundings, they discovered they were in orbit around a habitable planet. Blue oceans, green continents, white cloud formations. Preliminary scans showed no signs of technological civilization, but abundant life and resources. "You found us a new home," Kiri said, looking at the beautiful world below. "A new beginning," Caden corrected. "For all of us. And maybe, eventually, for others who want to be free of the Alliance's control." In the months that followed, they established a settlement on the planet, which they named Sunlight Station, in honor of both their previous refuge and the golden energy that had brought them there. Using the Liberty's communication equipment, they made cautious contact with other free settlements throughout the galaxy, gradually building a network of allies, united by their desire for independence from Alliance control. And all the while, the Golden Wormhole Network continued to grow. Reports filtered in from across the galaxy of new connections forming, linking previously isolated systems and allowing free travel outside of Alliance jurisdiction. The Alliance fought back, of course, interdicting vessels, blockading known entry points, hunting those they believed responsible. But they were fighting against an idea now, not just a man. The idea that freedom of movement, of connection, was a right that couldn't be controlled by any single power, an idea that spread like a smile across the face of the galaxy. 1 year after their arrival at Sunlight Station, Caden stood on a hill overlooking the growing settlement. What had begun as a cluster of prefabricated shelters had evolved into a proper community, with permanent structures, cultivated fields, and a central facility dedicated to the study of wormhole physics. Kiri joined him, as she often did during his evening contemplations. "Dr. Vex wants you to know that the latest test was successful," she reported. "They were able to create a miniature space-time distortion using the principles you've taught them. Not a true wormhole, but a step in that direction." Caden nodded, pleased, but not surprised. "It was never about me," he said. "The ability might be unique to my genetic makeup, but the underlying principles are universal. Anyone can learn to work with space-time rather than against it, given the right approach." "Speaking of approaches," Kiri said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "We received a transmission from the Kaiser hub. The Alliance is gathering a massive fleet there, apparently preparing for some kind of major operation. They're still trying to shut down the network," Caden surmised. "Yes, but there's more." Kiri hesitated before continuing. "They have a new weapon, something they're calling a space-time stabilizer. According to our sources, it's designed to neutralize the golden wormholes, force them back into normal space-time." "Can it work?" Caden asked. "Dr. Vex thinks it might," Kiri admitted. "The theory is sound, based on what little information we have. If they deploy it at Kaiser, they could potentially collapse the entire network, or at least the part that's connected to that hub." Caden considered this, looking out over the settlement, over the new life they had built far from Alliance control. "Then we'll have to stop them." "How?" Kiri asked. "Even with your ability, we can't fight an entire Alliance fleet." A smile formed on Caden's lips, not from simple happiness, but from a deep-seated certainty, a knowledge that they were on the right path, despite the challenges ahead. "We won't fight them," he said. "We'll show them a better way. If they want to see the true potential of the Tide Smile, then I'll give them a demonstration they can't ignore or suppress." As the golden light of the setting sun washed over them, Caden's smile widened, and with it, the first shimmer of a new kind of wormhole began to form in the air before them. One that would not just connect 2 points in space, but would connect minds, hearts, and possibilities across the divide of fear and control that had separated humanity for too long. The Tide Smile was not a weapon to be feared, but a gift to be shared. And as it spread across the galaxy, carried by those who understood its true meaning, the old barriers would fall one by one, replaced by bridges of golden light stretching toward a future where no one would ever be called human trash again.